G'day, it's Jamie and welcome to Tantanoola Tigers. Today I'm reading an old newspaper article about a Tasmanian tiger or thylacine attack near Port Davey on the west coast of Tasmania in 1883. So we'll get into it. This was published in the Mercury on Monday the 19th of March 1883, titled The Missing Prospectors. It will doubtless be welcome tidings to their many friends and to the public generally that the two prospectors, Bennett and Williams, about whose safety grave doubts have been entertained for weeks past, have found their way out of terra incognita in which they were placed, and are now safe and sound amongst their friends. A history of their adventures since landing at High Rocky Cape has been most courteously supplied to our reporter by Mr. William Gates of the Fishing Smack Foam, who happened to be in Port Davey when the two prospectors arrived from their long, arduous and perilous journey of 60 miles. When the SS Wakefield landed Bennett and Williams at High Rocky Cape with 2 weeks' provisions, the prospectors took it for granted that she would pick them up at the expiration of the time and carry them back to Boat Harbour. But it may be stated, in justice to Captain Reid of the Wakefield, that they had no grounds for thinking that the steamer would call in for them, as they had not requested such a thing to be done. They pushed ahead with their prospecting operations and waited near where they had landed until 10 days after the fortnight had passed by. All day long they kept a lookout to attract the attention of a passing vessel, and at night used to have fires alight to attract notice. To make their provisions last as long as possible, they put themselves on short rations, and with the aid of a few crayfish caught among the bull kelp, subsisted as well as could be expected under such peculiar and trying circumstances. After being in that locality for 3 weeks and a half, they came to the determination not to wait in hopes of the steamer coming in to carry them away, as they would inevitably starve. So they made their minds up to set out for Port Davey, about 60 miles distant, but the nearest place where they could obtain secure in their grave trouble. Before starting, however, on the 9th instant, they left a note up for the steamer to tell her to go to Port Davey to pick them up. When they started on their long walk through the scrubby country, they were only provided with, in the shape of food, 7 crayfish tails and something like 3 or 4 pounds of oatmeal, and carrying at the same time heavy swags on their back. They travelled all day long until night, and when they camped in this hospitable country, keeping a large fire burning throughout the night. On the second day out, as they were tramping along by a long bolt of seashore, they came across a dead body of a 10-ton sperm whale, which appeared to have been driven ashore in a recent gale. It would be impossible for a whaler to send boats ashore to cut up the carcass, as the water breaks some miles out, and there would not be sufficient water to take a boat in. The only approach to the whale is by land from High Rocky Cape. That same night, about 9 o'clock, with their campfire alight as usual, Williams heard what he thought was a badger or kangaroo bounding through the scrub near the fire, and on glancing around in the direction whence the sound issued, observed an animal springing towards him. As it landed on the ground, the glare of the fire prevented him from making out what the savage-looking nocturnal visitor was. As soon as his eyes got accustomed to the glare made by the fire, he made it out to be a large native tiger, a regular monster, about as large as a fair-sized calf. Then the tiger was only 2 yards away from him and was in the act of crouching for another spring. When the tiger was first recognised, it was in the act of making its second spring at them. Williams had his tomahawk behind him, but was afraid to turn around to get it, lest if he took his eyes off the tiger and only 6 feet off the ground separating them, it would spring at him. His mate Bennett saw the intruding animal when it was 5 yards away and drew his knife to plunge into it, but happened to catch sight of the stripes on its body, desisted from the intention of dispatching him on account of the extreme danger his own life would be placed in by such an act. So the two men commenced to scream and holler with all their might and main, and succeeded, very fortunately for them, in frightening the beast away to his lair in the forest, and were not troubled with him any more. The prospectors think that the tiger tracked them from their camp at High Rocky Cape and came up with them at their temporary camp. At dusk on the third day, out they arrived in sight of Port Davey, which was about 2 miles away, and was separated from them by a thick scrub. As it would have been impossible to penetrate such country in the dark, they wisely encamped there where they were and waited next morning to finish their long tramp through the forest. At 8 o'clock that morning, they arrived in a very exhausted state at Mr. John Carver's house, the only human being residing at that wild place. The poor fellows were well nigh done up when they reached the place, and would hardly have been able to have tramped through the bush another day. Mr. Carver received the wanderers very kindly, and was most unremitting in his acts of kindness to them, whilst they remained his guests during the next 2 days. The fishing smack smart foam, sailed by the brothers William and John Gates, was at Port Davey, and they most considerably invited the two prospectors to come up with them in their little craft. She left Port Davey last Wednesday morning and landed them in Retchery Bay on Friday morning. Bennett and Williams told Gates as soon as they arrived in Hobart to tell the captain of either of the steamers trading to the West Coast that they had reached Retchery Bay safely and wanted a steamer to call in for them and take them round to Troll Harbour. The foam passed the SS Wakefield bound to the coast on Friday, but could not get the steamer to stop to convey their message to Captain Reid. The Amy will call for them on her way round this week. Bennett belongs to Retchery, whilst his mate, Williams, is the son of a manager of the Orient TM Company. This was not the first occasion on which Bennett has had to tramp the West Coast. For some 18 years ago, he was wrecked round that way and had to walk to Port Davey then. Now, that's a pretty interesting name. They had a pretty tough time of it, these two guys. First thing, if you're going to go out in the wilderness, don't just expect people to pick you up. Organise it. I would have questioned that Captain Reid 100 times. Now, you're coming back for us, instead of not mentioning it at all, which is crazy. Okay, so they said the thylacine was as large as a fair-sized calf, and I was going to have a go at them, and just by yelling at it, and that got it to take off, which is pretty handy. And I don't know how you could have been starving if you had only had lobster tails to eat. Okay, that's it from me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.